Good morning, everybody. Just wait for everybody.
Fran.
Morning.
Hello, how are we?
Yes. Oh, good, good. Nice to see you, Brian. That's twice in 1 week for us, isn't
No, it's bad news, isn't it?
We should stop meeting like this. Good to see some familiar faces and some new faces as well. I'll just wait for everybody's sound to connect. I'll just do a quick bit of housekeeping while we're waiting as well. So for those of you who I've not met before, my name's Fran Stovald. I'm the Workforce Development Lead for Sporting Heritage. So I oversee all the training programme and the networks and the conference. Today's session is part of our Understanding Audiences programme, and the main part of the session will be led by my colleague Sonia, who I will hand over to in a moment. We are recording the session, so if you prefer not to be filmed, please feel free to switch your cameras off. There will be plenty of opportunity to chip in, ask questions. We will be asking for your feedback at various points. So I hope you're all feeling quite chatty this morning and happy to talk about how audiences relate to your work today. We've got quite a range of experience in the room today, so I thought it'd be quite good just to do a quick once round the screen to introduce yourselves and just say what audience work you've been doing and sort of what you're hoping to get out of the session so that we can tailor it as we go along. So I'm going to work my way around my screen. So actually, first up, Davey, you're first, if you're happy to make a start.
Hello, I'm Davey Allen, the museum manager at Heart of Midlothian Football Club. After our worst result in our history last night, probably, by Brora Rangers for the Highland League. One thing we're looking to do is make our audiences more diverse, especially with the COVID situation, because we had a brief spell in December when the museum was open, but we're looking to look at different ways of engaging audiences digitally. And it's probably fair to say that the majority of our audience is, elderly males, shall we say, right, or over 50 males. So it's to change our audience that way, and how we can engage with that. And my colleague Leanne Perry, I think, was on the last one of these.
Yeah.
And we've put a bid in to get some Heritage Lottery funding to actually help facilitate a lot of the moving to the more digital world.
Lovely, thanks.
But I would say the one thing we haven't done, we've not really done any surveys on our audience, so it's more just sort of gut feel in terms of audience. We haven't actually measured it.
Well, hopefully this session will give you some good starting points on where you can actually start collecting that data and the evidence that you can use to back up any bids or any work going forward. Steve, you're next.
Oh, hi, Fran. Morning. Well, if it's any consolation to Davey, we haven't won a red ball match for 2 years at Nottinghamshire anyway. But so one of the great things about sport is there's always another day, isn't there? But yes, I'm the heritage officer at Trent Bridge at Nottinghamshire County Cricket Club, where the sort of the impetus for thinking seriously about audiences is precipitated by our desire to apply for museum accreditation, and that's making us think a bit more. The sort of assumption is that we will provide a member benefit and a spectator benefit, and that's basically the core of our audience, members of the cricket club who attend county championship matches, to be quite honest. But the scope of our audience as being visitors on match days and non-match days, off-site, online, local media, really. We've done embarrassingly little profiling so far. We've done some evaluation of special events, and we've done evaluation of a pilot children's activity tour of the ground. And the club knows quite a lot about our membership profile, but we've got a lot of work to do. So that's why I was I think pretty honest with Sonia when I filled in the questionnaire, and I was embarrassed by how little we'd actually done when I filled it in. So
you'll find out you're not alone.
Yes, thank you, Sonia. I was very, very pleased to know that. I know that 2 or 3 wrongs don't make a right, but no, it was reassuring to know that anyway. So I'm here to play catch up anyway, Fran. So.
Lovely, thanks, Stephen. I think you'll find you'll probably be quite similar to a lot of other possibly people in the room who you're sat on little pockets of information, and it's a case of how you bring that together to make it
I think people have more information than they think they do, actually, a lot of the time.
And then work out then how you can plug those gaps. So sometimes when you feel like you're starting from scratch, when you look at it, you actually might not be, and you might actually be in a better position than you think.
Yeah, sure.
Trying to be positive about it all.
Yes, thank you.
Next on my screen, Richard, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Yeah.
Richard Bodie. I'm got a few hats on, really. I'm a very keen sports historian, member of British Sports History Society. I also engage in various educational projects. So I did come to the education one with Derek People last week. I'm also with another hat on, and I notice a fellow colleague from the Bristol Rovers History Group is here, Eric. So welcome to Eric. I hope he enjoys it. And we are very much in our infancy, and the comment Jess made about we might have a lot to sit on due to some incredible work by some people in the history group, what they put online. There's an incredible amount of stuff. And again, how best to use it, how perhaps to use it and engage people. So be interested to see what is said today. Okay, thank you.
Lovely, thanks. Brian, you're up next.
Hi, yes, I'm Brian Worrell, and I'm from the England Netball Heritage and Archive Group. We're an advisory body to the England Netball National Governing Body, a small group of 6 or 8 of us who are passionate about netball history and heritage. We've been in existence for around 6 years now, and we've arrived at the point where we now have an organised archive which people can search on and look at. We also have a website with some of that material on it. The rest resides at Heritage Key in the University of Huddersfield. That's where our National Archive now is. We are not a museum, we are an archive, so we're a bit different to some of the other people on this webinar. The reason I'm on this is because we are now at the point where we're just starting to get into trying to generate audiences, if you like, to come to primarily to the stuff that we've got, which can be searchable and etc. We already have researchers across the world looking at the history of netball and why it came into existence and stuff like that, and its social impact on society and whatever. Because netball actually started in England, much to the annoyance of other countries who believe it started there. So we're proud to bang on that drum. But also, although we want to generate, if you like, electronic or digital audiences, we're also interested in using that as a driver to get a more awareness of what netball is as a major sport across not only just England, but the rest of the UK and of course other countries. So we've just found that we can use Google Analytics from the people who host our website, and that looks awesome. And to be honest, we have not got to grips with it yet. So although some of the stuff that we're getting in the sort of the basic reports that we get from them is extremely interesting, I'm not quite sure how we're going to use it. And so simply put, I think from my perspective, generating audiences is all about digital audiences with a byproduct of physical audiences to the Super League and international matches, etc. Hope that suffices.
Yeah, lovely. Thanks, Brian. Eric, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Yeah, first time to engage with sport and heritage on the recommendation of Richard. As Richard's already said, I'm part of the Bristol Rovers History Group. We're about 2 years old, looking into the history of Bristol's oldest professional football club, if not the always the most successful professional club in Bristol. But yeah, we have the longest history, quite a rich history. We've got an awful lot of stuff now on our web page, including newspaper articles right back to 1883. We've engaged recently in buying memorabilia. We just recently bought a medal won by one of our players in 1889 at a Gloucestershire FA Cup final. So there's probably about 10 to 12 of us, very, very keen amateur historians who like to archive the photographs, the newspaper articles, photographs of memorabilia. Our football club now is engaging with us more, and they've now decided to build a trophy cabinet. Now you might laugh and say Bristol Rovers never won any trophies, but there are little medals in local things that we have won, and we'd like to fill that cabinet. So our mission is to continue communicating with people through our website. We want to go into schools in Bristol. We want to talk to the youth academy at the football club about the rich history of the club, and as well as continue to build our digital format, and maybe in time become a charity and get to the point of maybe applying for funding and things with regards to a museum one day if we ever get a new stadium.
Great, lovely. Yeah, sounds like there's lots of potential. Thank you. Carly, do you want to talk about audiences in the Hockey Museum?
Sure. I don't normally deal with the audience side of things. I deal with the collection side mostly, but I'm Carly at the Hockey Museum. We do have a really good relationship with, I would say, people that are already involved in hockey, but those that don't have anything to do with hockey, or, we really want to expand our audiences. We have the hockey family, but we want to go, bigger. We want everyone to know about us, because we're not just, you don't have to love hockey to love the museum.
It's getting out to those
it is, it's getting out there
for your sport. Yeah,
yeah,
I think that's probably true for lots of people, isn't it? That
yeah,
trying to reach those and pulling out those threads from your sport that link in with the social history and the history of the people or the town, that those other ways in that will hook your non-sport.
Exactly, because we've got military history within hockey, and we've got suffragette history within hockey, and there's so many little strands to pull to get people interested. And yeah, it's just really expanding that. And I mean, we've learned already that people aren't necessarily willing to come to Woking, to come to the museum. So it's, learning how to do things digitally, and maybe traveling exhibition, that sort of thing as well. Like just trying to find other ways to gather audience.
Yeah, great, lovely, thank you. Tamsin, you're next.
Hi, yes, my name is Tamsin. I am the trainee curator down at the Museum of Cornish Life. We're a accredited social history museum, obviously down in Cornwall and Helston. We've got a very general collection, but with our sporting collections, we cover Cornish sporting heritage, particularly stories about Bob Fitzsimmons, who was a Helston-born boxer. And I've recently been trying to draw out, just bringing my personal interest in, been trying to draw out the women's cricket stories that we have here from 1930s onwards in Cornwall. I'm very much at the beginning of my museum career. I'm sort of 3 months into my internship, so I know a little bit generally about the visitor surveys the museum do and the analytics, but I'm more interested in finding out specifically what the situation is with sporting heritage, who the audiences are, who's listening, and how I can get more people to listen to me bang on about women's cricket.
That sounds great. Well, from one lot of cricket to another, Chris, do you want to tell us about Yorkshire cricket? Oh, you're on mute still. There we are.
Yeah, sorry about that. I was just putting a message to Tamsin there. I was quite.
Oh yes, I see. Yeah.
Quite interested in the Cornish stories, and I'm working on. Sorry, I'm going off a tangent. I work with the Yorkshire Cricket Foundation, and I've been leading their Heritage Lottery funded project for over a year now. It's had some challenges due to the COVID pandemic. And that's coming to an end, but worked extensively with Sporting Heritage and Fran on the development of educational resources. So it'd be great to understand the audiences from a kind of education perspective, and how we can extract maximum value from the resources we've developed there, but also from a more personal perspective in terms of what's gone really well with the project in terms of engaging audiences in the pandemic is online reminiscence sessions. So it's understanding those online communities to understand how we can attract more. Because the program has been successful in attracting a regular good audience, but now it's all about expanding that and how we do that coming out of the pandemic, looking at hybrid options when we can all get to meet each other again. There's lots of permutations and lots of opportunities there, but just picking up on what Tamsin said regarding sport in general, I've got an interest in rugby league as well, and we can't go anywhere without mentioning that, unfortunately. I would be interested to know, a bit about the history of rugby league in Cornwall, because I understand there may have been some games there long time ago, odd game here and there. So let us know if you find anything out about that.
Yep, that sounds like a good connection to make. Elaine, you're up next.
Hi, I'm Elaine. I work as the Operations and Engagement Manager at the National Paralympic Heritage Trust. So sort of just going into lockdown last year. So the Heritage Centre was just coming up to a year since its opening. So we did have a visitor survey and we were collecting those where people were visiting. But because it was our first year of operation, very much having something in place with the view to kind of look at it more closely. What are we looking at and how do we want to develop that in terms of people visiting the centre itself? So we never actually got to that bit of work. It's a year on now, really. So we're very much looking to reopening and starting to think, it's a real opportunity for us to have a look at our feedback forms. What are we asking? What do we want to understand of our audiences? What do we know already? And how can we continue to build on that, really? So I think, it's been echoed from a few different people very much at the beginning of that journey in terms of understanding them. And I think an added dynamic really at the moment being all the work that we've been doing virtually as well, and just starting to think about how can we understand who our audience are in this virtual context as well.
Lovely, great. Yes, I think lots of people are in a very similar boat, aren't they? Rebecca, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Rebecca Prentice. I'm curator at the British Golf Museum. We've got a couple of projects underway at the moment. One of the biggest ones is that the museum is going to reopen in June, all being well, with completely redesigned galleries. So that's been interesting to work on during lockdown. But in the meantime, sort of before that was even a decision, we got some funding from Museum Galleries Scotland to run an audience development project to try and research our audiences and run activity and make adjustments to our museum so that we could attract new audiences. We've kind of gone through the sort of first phase of the project. Having done the research, we commissioned consultants to do the research. A lot of the findings were kind of stuff that we already knew, but it was quite helpful to have that data to back up some of our decision making. Unfortunately, with COVID, we didn't really manage to complete all the research we wanted to do. So I'm looking at trying to run some focus groups, potentially digitally, and hopefully actually on the run up to the museum, that should kind of get people a bit more interested in what's coming along. Yeah, so one of the particular things I think maybe a bit like some of the rest of you that we found is that we struggle to actually attract our local audiences, and really for the museum to kind of be sustainable, they're the people we want to engage with, and especially on the run up to the 150th Open, which is going to be in St Andrews next year. We really want to capitalize on this opportunity to get more people interested in golf history. And we've kind of taken that approach with the design of our new galleries, that it should be as appealing to non-golfers and have a lot of social history in there, but also tying into a lot of the values and aims of our parent organisation, R&A, to do with inclusivity and diversity and courage, to make sure that there's more representation. As we've mentioned before, things like women's golf is now threaded throughout all the different themes, rather than a chronology of golf, which we had before, where, you know, women appeared at the end of the 19th century. So yeah, it's all very exciting. I think I'm really interested to find out what everyone else is doing, and it's good to have this initial chat as well, because as we run activity, we can kind of feed back to the rest of the group on what's working, what's not working. And likewise, like everyone else has said, you know, digital audiences is a massive thing. We're kind of trying to become more international as well as local, and have that global remit. And I think digital audiences is obviously a great way to go to get more outreach that way. So
lovely, thank you. Yes, it's been one of those strange byproducts of the pandemic, hasn't it, that digitally we're suddenly all global and looking at, you know, your visitors could come from anywhere, but when you open your doors, your visitors are more likely to be your local and hyper local audiences, because people aren't traveling so much. So you've gone from one extreme to another in some ways, and it's how to program and meet the needs of two quite different audiences, and how, you know, just even how to identify them. So yeah, I'm sure we can talk more about that. Phil, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi there, yeah, I'm Phil Taylor. I'm a volunteer with Warrington Wolves Community Foundation, so another one coming up from the Rugby League side. We hold a collection of memorabilia, but we also have a physical timeline down the wall of one of the stands in the stadium, and an online version of that, which we're hoping to bring those up to date, the potential lottery bit there. And there's also within the organisation there's work going on around memory sessions with care homes and work historically being done in schools as well around the heritage side of things. But from a personal level, I'm just really looking to find out more about what the audience is and how we can maximise sort of who the audience is for this sort of thing out there.
Lovely, thank you very much. Helena, you're up next.
Hi, so I have two hats on, and I also work in an archive, and I work with collections mostly. But I work with the UK Web Archive, so we've got quite a large collection of sports websites from across the UK, and we're also members of the International Internet Preservation Consortium. So since 2010, they've been collecting them in the Olympics, and then after that in the Paralympics. So they're kind of two big collection areas that we work with. But I'm on maternity leave at the moment. So my main motivation for doing this is also with that hat on, but also in my free time I do some research on indoor football leagues in the late 60s in Ireland. And I was planning an exhibition before COVID hit, and that's been delayed, so it's probably going to be early next year. So I'd like to just get some tips and stuff about how we can generate audiences for that exhibition.
Lovely, thank you very much. Sorry, I had to dash off as somebody knocked on my door just as you started speaking. So I'm a little bit out of breath now. So last and by no means least, Eleanor.
Hi, I'm assistant curator at Manchester United Museum. It's been a really long time since we've done any visitor research, and obviously all of that is now hideously out of date because of the COVID pandemic. I think what Rebecca was saying before about we now need to be so focused on our local audiences, and it's not something that we've really ever done at Manchester United, not while I've been there, because we've usually had such a huge tourist influx that just isn't going to be there anymore. I think as well, we have created online content, but it's purely come from me and a colleague going, well, maybe we'd like to see this, and not really knowing what our audiences would kind of want to see online or expect to see online. So it's just been kind of made up.
With lots of professional intuition, I hope, you know, it's going back to what Rebecca was saying. Sometimes you sort of make assumptions about your audiences, but and sometimes you're right and sometimes you're wrong. And like you've obviously had at the Golf Museum, you've had consultants in who've confirmed your assumptions, but sometimes when you're working in the dark, it's difficult to know, you know, whether you're going down the right route or not. So yeah, we all think we know what our visitors would like to see, but you know, there's visitors can be quite surprising, I think, you know, in the best way. Right, so as you can see, there's quite a lot of experience and different experiences in the room, and but there's definitely some common themes that are, you know, running throughout. So I'm going to take a step back now and I'm going to hand over to Sonia. Would you like your presentation up, Sonia, or do you want to talk first?
Yeah, and then we can go through that. So
if you're not on mute, would you mind popping yourself on mute while we're going through the presentation? And then if you've got any questions, you can pop them in the chat, and we will be popping you into breakout rooms at about halfway through. So I would just share the screen again and we'll go back into the presentation.
Yeah, thanks. So as you can see, we've been through the welcome and introduction. So it's really interesting to hear from everybody as well. And as Fran said, there's a lot of different experiences in the room today, and also just a lot of different sort of needs as well. So hopefully we'll cover off some of those today, but we won't be able to cover everything, obviously. But we have got sessions during today looking at kind of what next and how we can support you in the future as well. So some of those things that you've got up, I've made a note of already. So they're things that I can feed into the report I'm doing. So the first thing I was going to do is just do a summary of the findings of the audience engagement and understanding research pilot program, just to get a bit of context to why we're doing this and where the sort of sector is generally in terms of understanding its audiences. Then we were just going to move on to do a bit of checking your understanding about why you collect, why you think you should collect audience data. Then we're, as Fran said, we're going to move into breakout rooms and look at what you do collect and why, and then feedback, and we can hopefully pick up on some of those things and some of those issues people were highlighting as well. I was just going to do a very small bit of signposting again, just to sort of like put you in the direction of some things that you might find useful. And again, that would probably come up again during the kind of the what do you collect and why session as well. So hopefully I can point you in directions of some useful resources. And then, as I said, we're going to do a bit about what next. So we're going to do just a short poll with everybody just to try and get an understanding of what you might want in the future and how we might be able to help you moving forward as well. So if I could have the next slide, Fran, that would be great. I should say, as Fran said, if anybody's got any questions, pop them in the chat as we go along, and then we can try and pick up on those things as we're going through as well. So again, I just thought it'd be useful just a bit of context about why I'm doing this bit of work and why I'm here today as well. So the Sporting Heritage received some funding from the Heritage Fund to look at audiences, sporting heritage audiences. So this is just a very brief summary of the key points of the research that I was asked to undertake. So as you can see, it's very much about trying to understand what the audiences are for sporting heritage, what gaps there are, and where people may need support. And as you see, the final point is that strategy with clear action points over a 2-year period. So very much today is feeding into that as well. So that helped me in terms of just trying to get more of an understanding about what some of your needs are moving forward. So if I could have the next slide, Fran. So I'm just coming to the end of the period of time. So my report is due at the end of April. But just as I've been writing it up, these are some of the sort of key things that have come up through the research. So I undertook quite a wide-ranging survey. I know some of you here today actually were kind enough to fill that in, and it's been really helpful in getting that information back from people. I should say we got a really wide response from different people of different nations and also different sizes of organisation as well. So really, I mean, what's been showing is I think sort of anecdotally Sporting Heritage knew this, but it's kind of just backing up that obviously data collection has moved beyond just most people collecting data about their visitor figures, although there still are some people who don't collect visitor figures. And when I talk about visitor figures, I'm talking about that both physically and virtually as well. So people collecting visitors' numbers to their websites and things like that as well. So generally, when I'm talking about visitors, I do mean everybody, sort of virtual and physical. As you probably understand from people's feedback in the room today, that there is a real inconsistency of data collection across different heritage and cultural sectors. And by that, I mean sort of different people who may have sports only focused collections, but then people who also have mixed collections as well. So there's a real sort of real mix of how people collect their data and how they use it as well. And differences within how they collect that virtually and with their physical visitors, as well, as a lot of you have recognised today. We've really found that a lot of the time it's collected ad hoc and generally used for funders and projects rather than strategically. So I mean sort of regularly and feeding into sort of reports and things like that. So generally the exceptions tend to be that around if you're an accredited museum or archive. I think that's mainly to do with what you have to prove to become an accredited museum or a national portfolio organisation. There are types of data that you need to prove to them. So it's a slightly different requirement there. Again, we've had a lot of feedback again that people have lack of time and resources, that's a key reason for not collecting the data. And then when, as we said again, that a lot of people just, it's anecdotal about what they know, it's just the feeling that they get or they see people coming in. So again, I mean, it's something that's come through from a lot of you today as well. And then it's just a lot of people see audience data as marketing information, not more generally. So it's just data is really helpful across your organisation, not just for marketing. And then I'm going to talk about this a little bit more as well, is this local area profile. And again, this links into what a lot of you were saying, is knowing more about your local audiences and how to respond to those. So again, it's something we can touch on today as well. So we'll move to the next slide, Fran. This is just a quick summary of the responses. I've just talked a little bit about this. So we had quite a good response, a total of 72 people. There was about a 50-50 split between people who had sporting collections and people who had mixed collections. I mentioned this before as well, that accredited museums and archives and national portfolio organisations are more likely to collect and analyse their demographic and other visitor profiling data. And I think, again, that comes through quite clearly. Again, it's just saying this thing about how the data is used and how people do it in terms of regularity of collecting the data and then how that's collected. As you can see, there's quite a lot of people who don't collect data about their non-users as well. So you've got 31% of people collecting about both, but that indicates that a lot of people aren't collecting information about their non-users, and that's just as important to collect about as to your users. So I think that's quite an interesting stat, and we'll probably touch on that today, I should imagine. Quite a lot of people have on-site visitor surveys, but again, it's about how they use that information and about how that's coming through. People do tend to collect some kind of demographic profiling data, but it tends to be sort of age, how old people are. So it's and then it sort of falls off after that in terms of, collecting things like gender and where people come from. Interestingly enough, more people collect data about visitors to their website, and then a lot of people have social media accounts, which probably won't come as any surprise at all. And actually a lot of people do have some kind of analytic tool to collect that audience data as well. So as you see, I mean, there's quite a mixed sort of picture about data collection, who does it and who doesn't, and how people use it. So next slide, Fran, please. So we're just going to go on to just involving you guys a bit more in today. So I'm interested to hear from you, and just to try and get a bit more understanding about where you're coming from. So we can take everybody off mute in a minute, and so would be really helpful to do if you could just all just individually take a couple of minutes just to write down 2 reasons why you collect data about your audiences, and then we're just going to do a bit of around the room again like we did before about why you think it's important to collect that data. So if we just give people a couple of minutes, and then we can then share back to the rest of the group. If anybody's got any questions, just ping me a quick message in the chat room, and if people don't understand. So brilliant. So if we give people till about 7 minutes past, Fran, yeah. Get people starting to think.
Right, so everybody had a chance. Yeah.
It's 2 minutes now. So yeah, so if we go round, should we start with you, Davey? Okay.
A couple I put down was to get a current view of your audience. You would do the measure, but I suppose the real thing is then targeting the people that are missing.
Yeah.
So that's one of the key things is to work out, you know, what parts of your that you're not engaging with at all, or having very little engagement with.
Yeah, and as you can see from what I was talking about earlier, there's a lot of people that I think people find it quite difficult to actually do that work and understand how to get to non-users, because it's, you know, it's quite obvious about who's coming to your museum or site or whatever you've got, and to maybe virtually, but actually when you're talking about people who can't engage with you or you know aren't engaging with you, then I think that's a little bit more difficult for people to understand how to do that. So Steve, should we go to you next?
Thanks, Sonia. Yeah, I'm in the strange position. We know quite a lot about the profile of cricket spectators through ECB and club research anyway. I'm probably more interested in the reaction to the current heritage provision and the suggestions for additional or improvements, trying to assess the relative demand for those, really. Those would be my priorities, really.
Users and non-users thing, again, a bit similar to Davey, actually, isn't it, in terms of trying to find out, you know, what people think of you, and that can be the non-users as well as the users. So,
yeah, sure.
Yeah. Okay. Richard, should we go to you next?
Oh, you're on mute, Richard.
You're mute, Richard.
Yeah, again, that shows I'm not very technical at all, and
oh, don't worry, I do it all the time.
I don't know too much about the website, but Eric may say something on that in a moment.
Yeah.
I don't know if we collect how many people visit, etc., etc. But obviously, looking at it, my perception would be, you know, then we could target certain groups if we think for educational terms, local, national, and even networking. If we've got other football groups that we know are visiting our website and are interested, to build networks up would be really good. We've already established quite a good network, and Fran and others will know, with Ipswich Town and Tim, who's usually at these sort of meetings. So Eric may probably say a little bit more, but obviously as a history group at Bristol Rovers, you know, the target, the audience, obviously the fans that go in to the ground when we're back running again, and how we'd actually all target those as well, I suppose, making them aware. Okay.
Yeah, and I think again, it's just a lot of you are saying similar things, aren't you, about how to target those audiences and how to understand them more. So yeah,
I think it was interesting what Richard was saying, that it's also about making partnerships and networks, isn't it? Because quite often people think about audience development or audiences as those individual people who come through your door or visit your website, but actually knowing who your audiences are is a good route to making partnerships which may support projects or funding. So it's groups as much as individuals, isn't it?
yes, because it does cut across different, as you say, different community groups or local groups that are operating, and you can often get it's often a way into funding as well by doing partnership projects with people as well. So that whole kind of knowing who your networks are and who is locally as well is is quite an important part about audience development as well. So Brian, we'll go to you next. Oh, you need to go off mute.
I've had to change location because my internet became unstable.
Oh, sorry.
Right, we haven't started collecting data yet, as I explained at the beginning. We've only just got Google Analytics and we don't know how to use it. But one of the reasons that we wanted to get analytics was because we were told how good it was, but also from that, the first two things we want to do is measure the impact of some of our activities. For example, do we get more people inquiring about netball from attending, say, an international match or something? But secondly, on that, what's the impact of us writing an article in either the Netball magazine or other sporting magazines, etc. And then secondly, we want to identify the gaps in our audiences, because although we're a national group at the moment, we have a wide network. I think the hockey lady said this. Have regions and we have counties, and we will be expanding out the network to those as well, who will then keep their own archives. I mean, we can't possibly take on all their stuff, so they'll have to do their own archives, but in a controlled network way, so that with links between us all, so we have, if you like, a digital archive, the netball family. So those are the two things we want to try and do, but also identifying the gaps. It's getting outside the netball family. I think the hockey lady said as well. So
yeah, again, it's a common themes coming up through this, isn't it, about why people are reasons why they want to collect the data. But I also think that whole thing about identifying gaps to then build strategically on what you're doing, and know your audience to do that strategic development is really important as well. So I think that's it's a really key thing to audience research and development as well. So thanks, Brian.
Sorry, just jumping in, for those of you who are looking at learning how to use things like Google Analytics in a bit more detail, if you're not already aware, the Digital Culture Network have run a number of very accessible webinars that are all in their YouTube channel. I'll put the link in the chat. But I've been watching them and learning how to use the analytics and how you can interpret them effectively. So I'll pop that link in now.
Yeah, there's been quite a lot of information come out about it and how to use digital resources, obviously, through the pandemic. So yeah. Eric, you want to go next? Sorry.
Hi there, yes. I'm finding this very interesting. I think we have not thought about this at all. I think we have great potential for a reasonably large audience. We have a Facebook page where we have 4,000 members who share photographs and memories and things like that. We have our match day program, which is one of the best-selling programs in the lower leagues. These are our two main probably outlets where we write articles and reach out to audience. And then we have our website where we store so many of these great memories, photographs. We've teamed up with a podcast team of youngsters who call themselves Retro Rovers. They've started interviewing players from the past and things like that. And one of the most recent projects that we've now had to try and get more young people involved is we've created a Hall of Fame of the 10 sort of best or loyal players we've ever had. And we've got a painter in painting out the clubhouse with the 10 pictures of these players, and people are there's a lot of chat on our Facebook about who will be the next person announced in the Hall of Fame. We're announcing the 10 sequentially over 10 weeks, and it's creating quite a lot of interest. So I can only tell you that I think we've got quite a large audience, and we've worked hard on gaining an audience, but we've done no analytics of it at all, or even thought of what Google Analytics and things might be able to do for us. So,
but it's interesting because what I was going to say about that actually, Eric, is that you've got a lot of ways in to collect data, and what I mentioned before was actually people don't feel that they have got much data and have got ways of engaging with people, but actually all those things are all ways that you can engage with your audiences, and you'll have data through all of those things, because all of those will have some kind of analytics behind them or something that you can actually engage with people as well. So you'll have a lot of existing data already there that you can use, and then you can also use that as a way to engage and consult with people as well. So you've got a strong network there anyway, and a good place to start. So
I think beyond just curiously asking how many hits have we had on our website, I don't think we've given it any further thought, and that's all a bit self-indulgent, really, just see how popular we are. But yes, I think any help we can have about what we might be able to do with these figures and use it to our advantage would be very good.
Yeah, and I think that's definitely one of the things moving forward that we can, I mean, it's come up a lot through, what everybody's been feeding back about doing something specific around sort of that digital audio. I mean, we're not going to be able to go into that a lot today. I mean, it's going to be very sort of surface today in terms of just sort of, what I can sort of go through with you. But I think there's definitely something around that in terms of how to support people with that, because it's something that's come up a lot even today. So yeah, I think that's really, and yeah, there's lots of different ways you can do things. There's lots of tools out there already. And then it's about how you use that data and how you analyze it, and then move forward with it. And also there's things like you can put up polls on Facebook and things like that as well to ask a question and find out about things. So there's lots of engagement tools that are built into those platforms that you can use as well for engaging with your audiences and finding out more about them as well. So yeah,
and you'll find once you can get into the analytics behind your Facebook page, although you feel that you've not necessarily been monitoring it, Facebook has been quietly monitoring it the whole time your Facebook page has been up. So actually it's been capturing all that data, even if you haven't looked at it until say today or tomorrow. All that data for the whole time you've had your Facebook group up will be there. So actually you've been quietly working away on it without even realizing it.
Yeah.
So
and
then
you think what a powerful marketing tool that is for Facebook and how they use that.
Yeah, there are pros and cons to how Facebook monitor all your data, but from an audience point of view, that's really helpful. So once you can get to grips with how they express that, you'll be able to look at, yes, how many people are actually visiting your site, but it's also looking beyond that and looking at how many people are sharing it and how your network is growing, and when you can see when posts are most popular, and how your visitor figures go up and down. So there's all sorts of information that's all being captured. So as Sonia says, you're actually sat on a little bit of a gold mine to start with, and it's working out what you want to do with it. Next we can.
I think that's often the most tricky bit, is that you actually have got a lot of data, and then it's working out which are the bits that are relevant to you and what you want to use them for. And actually it's that bit that I think it's A, people don't realize they've got it, then B, it's just then working out what you want to do with that, and that's where your sort of planning comes in about how you actually use that data moving forward. And
I don't want to hog the baton here, but how do I actually access that information?
I can contact you directly, Eric, and then I can give you some tips. And it maybe if other people find it useful, we could do a roundup at the end, actually, Frank, and we're about just some bits and pieces like that, and send it around to everybody. Yeah. We can do some just pointers as well, because both me and Fran have done that work. That sounds okay to everybody. Okay, brilliant. It's fine, Eric. Just if you've got any questions, just let us know. So I know quite a lot of people are putting stuff in the chat, actually, so we'll have a look at that in a minute as well. Carly Lynn, do you want to feedback?
Hiya. So I actually monitor our social analytics for the Hockey Museum. It's one of the things I love doing. and I do it to see, you know, who we're engaging with, when we're engaging with them, and how I can sort of improve that. And also, like, one of the questions, you know, because you asked why collect audience data, you know, obviously it's to find out who you're engaging with, but also what it is they want to see from you.
Yeah, both those things are really useful bits of information moving forward for your programming and across your services as well. So it doesn't matter if you're online or on site, it really can then help you inform what you're providing for your audiences and for people coming as well. So yeah, it gives you a really clear idea then as well. Tasman, can we go for you next?
Yeah, it's sort of a similar point, but also where people are engaging. I think it's important to collect this data to identify the nuances within your audience. So thinking about a digital audience, I know that we have a digital audience, but then looking further into that, the people engaging on our webpage and our blog posts are different to the people engaging on Facebook and Twitter and YouTube. And so I've only been here a very short while, but I've been able to notice that, and I'd have that in mind now when I'm creating content for those different platforms. And it's similar to what everyone else is saying, but just identifying those nuances and targeting those audiences to create that engagement.
Yeah, and it's one of those really important things, as you say. People do engage with social media in different ways and use different platforms to engage with you differently as well. So it is making sure your content is suitable for that audience that you're engaging with, and then that applies obviously physically as well as virtually as well. So it's just a good principle just generally to have in terms of just making sure you're delivering stuff that people want rather than what you think they want. So Chris, sorry, I was going to call you Yorkshire Cricket Foundation because that's your name on the thing. Sorry. Sorry, Chris. I was just thinking, I have a bit of a mind thing there. Sorry.
No, it's just a couple of things, quick thoughts on this. An obvious one, I think, been mentioned before, is the reason why we collect this data, external funder requirements. Obviously, the projects I've been working on, they require it, but there's obviously a good reason why they require it. So that reason is also important to the organisation in terms of number of people you're engaging with, what age they are, and if it's something that you want to engage the whole community in. Like someone said before, why are some age groups engaging better than others? And it's just all that, I think, for me, understanding who's engaging, why they're engaging, and trying to understand, why people aren't engaging. And so it's all about how you can improve and develop your offer, be it online, offline, or wherever you are, really.
Yeah. Oh, okay, sorry. Yeah, and as you say, it's that the data is really important to funders as well, and that often will be a driver for people to collect data, but then it's also make it part of your regular business, that you do actually do it on an ongoing basis, because I think funders have been driving a lot of audience data collection, and then it's that sort of next move on to make it part of your everyday business and make sure that you're embedding it, is informing everything that you've got going on, because I think that's the important part of audience data collection and doing it. So yeah, Rebecca.
Yeah, I think kind of just off the back of that, actually, I had to put kind of data informing, as Chris said, to do with funding and resources, and that's not just the money that's spent on things, it's also staff time, and just informing what you're doing is working. So like an example from our museum, it's not just about collecting the data, it's how you do it. So quite a lot of money was spent on a children's pack for kids to do activities within the museum. And then, to all intents and purposes, we kept putting it out, but the data that was collected was often verbal things, or verbal praise about the packs given by grandparents. But does that mean that the children actually enjoyed it? Did we collect any data from the children?
Yeah. And I think that's really important point, isn't it, as well? It's like making sure how you're collecting your data is relevant to the audience you're collecting the data about as well. So, that with that, you have got two levels of data you'd want to collect. It's about how the parents or carers or supporters are, operating, but also it's like how the children are actually finding it as well.
Yeah, so then it's, how are you collecting it? Is there some sort of observations that go on even, or is there anything that actually comes back to us? Is there any incentive for children to share in whatever way that they communicate, how they found it? But, we continuously put out the packs, spend money on them. There's a lot of time that's gone into it from our learning and access curator. And then in our, feedback from our bigger kind of audience report, most people don't think that our galleries were family friendly. So it's, there's a lot to do with how you collect it, and then also how that informs your resources, the money you spend on things, what are you really aiming to do? And then, off the back of that, really the accessibility as well. And there's obviously been a lot over the last year highlighting accessibility. It's interesting that a lot of places collect something like age, because it's quite an easy one to kind of guess, as it were. And I think there's a lot of us that we have to be a bit more courageous about collecting a bit more, because there are things like unconscious biases out there, and we have to make sure that what we're doing is open to as many people as possible. It's not just for a select group. And golf as a subject matter really suffers from this perception of elitism, but then we have so many stories within our collections and feedback from actual golfers that that's not the case right now. So it's one of those things about accessibility, and getting that feedback, as you said, from users and non-users to help inform messaging.
And as you say, across the board as well, so you're not just targeting who you feel comfortable with consulting with and undertaking evaluation with, but also broadening that out and making sure that, as you say, you're collecting data from everybody. And I mean, I get quite a lot that visitor surveys, people feel uncomfortable about approaching people, and but that goes back to staff training and being able to talk to people and give them the confidence to be able to talk to people, and then be able to explain why you're doing it as well. Because I think often, as long as people know why you're doing something and why it's important, and that they can see, then that makes the conversations much easier when you're collecting data as well. But that here is a whole issue, which is that whole thing about collecting data and how you do that. And obviously through a visitor survey, your main point of contact is probably doing that through a person, although there is computerized ways of doing it as well. So I think that's
I mean, off the back of this staff thing, it's really difficult, because inevitably the lack of experience means that people do feel quite nervous about collecting data. But I think there's also, and it's kind of a human thing, how open are you to find out what you have done isn't working? And is that a pride thing, or is it, and then to have that relayed to your organization, it's really difficult. But I think it's
I think, as you say, Rebecca, it is a massive barrier within organizations generally. I think just about being told that things aren't right, and actually I think just knowing what isn't going well is just as important as knowing what is going well, because that, and actually a lot of the time when you find out what isn't going well, that tells you much more about how you're operating than when you're getting, oh, this is wonderful. So, but as you say, I mean, there is a kind of that's something I find a lot when I'm doing audience development work, is that organizational reticence. I would say that was, yeah, it's a big thing, and people just not feeling confident about doing it and not necessarily wanting to hear, and that can come from, you know, top down and bottom up as well. So, yeah.
And I think you touched on a really interesting thing, Rebecca, about being able to use audience data for advocacy about how you spend your budget and who you work with. So actually, it's a really, you can use all this data to shape your program and to go to those who are higher up the chain to say, you know, our audiences say this, we should be doing this activity. So you can really use it as to shape the work of the museum. It can be a really good lever, because it's, you know, it's a bit like getting consultants in, is it's this third party who, you know, are thought to be reliable and trustworthy, who can you know, really influence the trustees and stakeholders, because it's not coming from, you know, the curatorial staff or the learning team. You're saying we've been out, so that qualitative data that you collect can be really powerful, although it's quite hard, because as we just said, you know, people often feel like you're asking people for qualitative detail. It's finding that balance so you don't feel like you're prying or you're asking things that people are uncomfortable with. But there are ways and methods.
I was going to say, there's ways and means of doing things, and getting, you know, audience data collection should always be a real mixture of different methods and ways of doing things anyway, so you're getting that kind of feedback from different people. And also, I mean, following on from what you were saying, Fran, as well, in terms of just that advocacy as well, then it has the knock-on effect that you're producing and programming things that people want, so then that brings more people in. So it's that whole kind of, it sounds like that virtuous circle, isn't it, that you're doing your planning, your research, and then you're feeding it back in, and then you're changing what you're doing. So it is that kind of virtuous kind of, you know, you're always continually feeding back in. I mean, if you look at kind of, you know, key brands, I mean, that's what they're doing constantly, isn't it? They're constantly asking us about what we think and what we feel about things, and then improving what they're doing. So it's just, you know, it's taking that kind of model across. So Eleanor.
Hi, so
Sorry.
the area where I work in is quite difficult to access the content. There's a lot of legal restrictions.
Yeah.
So I think, so understanding who's not engaging with the collections is really useful, but also those who are engaging with it, how likely are they to come back and engage with it again? And what were the challenges they faced while doing it? Because that could help. There's some things like you just can't make easier because of the legal restrictions, but other things you can maybe find some ways of maybe developing user guides and other things that will help kind of troubleshoot some of the issues that they came across.
Yeah, as you say, it's been really responsive then, isn't it, to what people want, and trying to, you know, get that return visitor, isn't it, as well? Eleanor, sorry, Helena and Eleanor are very similar, aren't they? So.
I think from our perspective, it's something that has been brought up a lot, is knowing what people actually kind of want from us and knowing how they respond in the space, and kind of making that much more than our like anecdotal, you know, oh, well, it looks like people are spending more time in this bit and it looks like people are doing this, that and the other. I think it'd be great for us to have something much more solid, as you're saying, for advocacy and for just knowing if we're doing something right.
Yeah.
I think whenever we've done visitor surveys and things in the past, it's been run by our marketing team, so it has been very much more like, well, they enjoyed this space, and we kind of need to dig down a little bit deeper than that.
And I think that's a really important point, actually, is about that whole thing about it being more than marketing. And it's just, for marketing, they will ask, you know, specific things, and that's what they need for their marketing. But actually for an organisation and for what you need, as you know, for programming different things, you'll ask different questions and you'll want more information. So yeah, I think that's a really important point as well. So yeah, I think as well, I think hopefully this proves to people that you know more than you think you do as well, because I think it's really interesting when people think about audience development. I think maybe they think that they don't have the information or don't have the knowledge. So hopefully we're starting to sort of just uncover, I know some of you will be aware of this anyway, because I know there's a range of different kind of experiences in the room today, but that is really, you know, that there is, I think you probably know why you need to do it, but then it's making sure that you're kind of doing that in a structured way, and then moving it forward in a planned approach. Because I think a lot of it is, as quite a lot of you are saying, is ad hoc, and then you get anecdotal information, and it's kind of, you know, it's building a kind of picture, but not a very structured picture about what's going on. So Fran, if you could put back the slides again, I think you could just go to the next slide. I'm pretty sure, because I checked while you were all talking, I think we've probably covered all this. In terms of understanding who's coming to your museum, is you're better informed. That's what I was talking about, is your content, interpretation, marketing, strategy, planning. So it does cover, you know, anything that you're doing within your organization, and it doesn't matter, again, if you're just virtual. It can, you know, be just as important to plan where you're going and how you're going to develop your online engagements with people for the future as well. So, and I know from when you were talking, everybody was, you know, really saying about that better understanding of your audience, and then likes and needs, about targeting who you want, and understanding that, recommendations that they're based on knowledge of your audiences and what they want. So again, it's just, as people were saying, it's not just anecdotal. That identification of gaps and where there's room for improvement, and, you know, and also identifying what you're doing well as well, because I think sometimes people don't really collect that data even as well. They might collect it anecdotally, or they may have visitor books or comments books which are useful, but then again, you need to analyze those as well. You need to look at them and actually take information from them. So a lot of people will have visitor books and have lots of, like, you know, nice comments, but then they won't actually do anything with them. And there are ways that you can do that in terms of analyzing qualitative data, people, you know, comments from people. Excuse me. Oh, sorry. Sorry, I had my jab and I'm feeling a bit weird. So again, it's picking up on a few people's points. It's the evidence that you use in your resources effectively. And then that final one that, you know, again, a few people picked up on, is making a case for funders, decision makers as well. So again, I think, you know, between us all, or between you all, you picked up on all those things. And I think it's quite useful just to go through that, and just to understand that you probably do understand that information. So unless there's any questions, I'm just going to move on now. So Fran, do you want to go to the next slide, please? So we're just going to break you out into groups. How many groups are we going to do, Fran?
3.
3. Okay, we'll break up into 3 groups.
For anybody who, I'll just come out of the share.
Yeah.
So that I can see everybody. So for anybody who's not been in a breakout room before, what you'll find is once I open up the rooms, you'll get an invite, a little pop-up on your screen. If you just click it, it will automatically transfer you into a breakout room. There'll be 4 or 5 of you in each room. I think we've covered some of those first couple of questions about what people collect and why they collect it. So maybe it's about talking about what you find difficult to collect, and see if you can share any reasons of, you know, different examples of how you can get over that, or things that you would like to collect but don't know how to.
Yeah.
So maybe they're the key questions to maybe look at. So I'm going to open up the breakout rooms now, without trying to pick on people. If one person could feedback, but I am going to, trying to be polite. So if one person could feedback on behalf of each group. So in room 1, this is the room that had Davy and Helena, Rebecca, Stephen, Tamsin in. Who would like to feedback on behalf of your group?
I don't mind, Fran, just saying a couple of things really. One was the depth of information about the profile. You know, that there's a sort of headline knowledge of numbers and stuff like that, but there's a shortage of actually richness, depth of information. The other is about tracking physical engagement with displays and with heritage provision in some form or other. Those were probably the 2 themes, although anybody else chip in as well. But
yeah, and I mean, certainly picking up on that depth of information about visitor profiles was definitely something that came back in the general survey, as I said in the bit at the beginning. And there is that thing that people tend to just often will do age, because I think Rebecca said this, because it's quite easy to do. And I think because often they think they can see someone and they look, oh, you look like that. So, but I think that's increasingly hard to do these days as well, is to sort of like judge something. So yeah, I think that is something that people do, don't collect, and to have that consistency of data across organizations as well is really helpful, because it enables you to set up profiles of organizations across as well. So it's not just for yourselves, it's also for your sector as a whole. So again, it just makes it easier to maybe do joint funding applications and things as well. So trying to get that consistency of data across as well. So yeah. And then about tracking physical engagement with collections, and how people, that's a really interesting one. It's not something I've really touched on in the report, because it wasn't something that came up a lot from people, but it's that, as you say, it's about how people interact with the exhibitions, and to make sure that you're compiling exhibitions and putting exhibitions together that people then want. So there's quite a lot of different methodologies about how you can do that, right from initiation of exhibition, when you first got that first idea, and again talking to people and undertaking that audience development, right up to when you've got something actually in place, and then doing observations of people. We're just about to start something, a project me and Fran are doing, where we're going to put up little blackboards that you can buy with questions on, and then look about how people are engaging with the collections through those questions. So again, it's a really observational thing, but you can see how people, so we're doing it as a trail, so we're using two things at the same time. So we're looking at it as a trail, but then also using it as a piece of evaluation as well. So you can do things like that, where you can link two things together, where people then don't know that they're participating in an engagement evaluation activity, but actually you're doing it. So, and then we're going to change the trail at different points to look at different areas of the collection. So that was something I picked up from Kids in Museums. So it wasn't my idea, I nicked it from somebody else. So, and that's always what I'd say as well, is look what other people are doing and see how other people are doing stuff, because there's a huge wealth of information out there about how people do things and how they do it. And knowing Kids in Museums just done a big bit of research about family engagement during COVID. So there's there are things that people have done that you can then pick up on and use as well. So yeah.
Lovely, thank you. So in room 2, this was Brian, Carly and Chris. Who would like to feedback on behalf of your room? Go on, somebody jump in before I pick on somebody.
Carly, are you going to go for it?
Go on, Carly.
Yeah, all right.
Pressure.
I know, the pressure. So all three of us were actually in sort of different stages. Brian a little bit earlier on, trying to get into the analytics of it all. Chris already doing analytics, myself as well. I think what came out of it was that, you can collect all this demographic data, which is great, but it'd be nice if we can also get, people's feedback, like, what have they thought of what they saw?
Yeah.
And the idea of maybe using polls came up. Because I mean, obviously if you just give a blank, what did you think, with like a blank box, people just go, oh no, I don't want to fill that out. But maybe a poll where they just click on A, B, C, or D.
Yeah, there's various bits of technology that you can use. So they do sort of booths and things now where you can do that. So that's a more sort of technologically sort of based way of doing that. But also, I mean, I do know museums who have to do really simple things where they have kind of, again, it's embedded into the collection. So it's a game. And then they have things like, you drop things into, it's a bit like when you go into the supermarket, isn't it? And you put your token in. So there's really simple ways where you can do that engagement as well. And then you can do that online as well as on your site as well. So as I said, that Facebook and Twitter both enable you to do polls. I know we're having one today through Zoom as well. So you can do like, if you want to go a bit further into that, you can convene focus groups and get people to feedback to you as well in terms of that. So there's a whole raft of different engagements that you can do that are outside that basic sort of quantitative evaluation, where you're just collecting sort of, just your figures. And as I say, you know, comments books, although, you know, I think they're really useful if you use them. That's the thing. And things like TripAdvisor as well, all those things, again, it's this whole wealth of information and data you'll probably have. And again, it's about making sure you use it in a structured way and that you're using it to inform what you're doing. So it's just something me and Fran were talking about during the break, doing when you're in breakout rooms, is that you don't have to, you know, do all this data stuff all at the same time. And even if you just start small, just pick something you're going to do, test how you're going to do it, and then make sure that that feedback you've got then informs what you're doing. So I hope nobody feels overwhelmed that, you know, because it can seem overwhelming. There's all this data that you can collect and you've got it. But, you know, if you just try it out on small things and then do a plan from there about how you're going to use your data and how you can then make sure it informs what you were doing, and then you can gradually build up what you're doing as well, because, you know, it can be a lot, because there is a lot of data that you can have, what you will have. So yeah, just start small and then build up from there. So
yeah, I think it's important to set up something that's within your capacity, because you want it to become part of your business as usual. You don't want to set up something that's so unwieldy or so ambitious. I mean, it's fantastic to be ambitious about your audience development, but actually if it means that either if you're in a funded project and it's after the project finishes, you don't have the capacity to deliver that sort of data collection, then it's, you know, it's not worth your while.
Yeah, I always say to people, make sure you embed it into what you're doing, because I think too often people see it something additional to what you're doing. And I think if you get into the habit of embedding it into what you're doing, and if you start something new up, then it's part of what you're doing rather than an additionality. And then it's always, then you get into that sort of process of way of working. So obviously it is more work, but it's just a different type of work. And I think it's just about looking at how you work, and that you just adjust your working practices and
never underestimate how much people like to give their opinions. If you're struggling to find that qualitative data, I know we always think that the people who when you ask them if they'll give you some feedback, you know, you naturally get people who, you know, it's like people who like to write complaints forms and things like that. But actually sometimes people like, you know, we'd really value your opinion. You know, if somebody stops you and go, oh, what do you think about this brand of mayonnaise? You go, oh, well, I don't like that, I prefer this one. You know, even if it's just quick things, people do like to be asked and be valued. I mean, and I say Sonia and I've been working on an audience development program for another museum that I'm at, and we were hoping to do this, and obviously the lockdown prevented it. So we ended up doing it as an online survey that was incentivized. So if you can incentivize it, we did it in the run up to Christmas and gave away a £25 John Lewis voucher in the run up to Christmas, and that definitely got us more responses. And then there was an option within that for people to then have follow-up, more in-depth conversations with Sonia, so you can sort of double layer things. So you get that initial raft of responses, and then you can dig deeper digging. And even if you only get a handful of people, it's all adding to that overall picture. So as Sonia says, it's sort of thinking laterally and creatively around how you can get to the people you want to speak to, and then just building it in. And I mean, things like online surveys, you know, all we had to do was promote it through our newsletters and social media, and we got a pretty good return. So definitely worth thinking of. So room 3, so that was Eleanor, Eric and Richard.
Well, I'll kick off if you want. Is that all right?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
Well, I think it was a masterstroke from Fran, obviously organised to put 3 football people together. Obviously,
I don't know if it's planned at all, was it?
Yeah, it was little and large. It was Bristol Rovers versus Manchester United, so slightly different. But I mean, at the Bristol Rovers end, we haven't really collected data about things, but obviously it has sort of made us think quite a lot about it. But we had a very profitable discussion just about how the various organisations run. Obviously, Manchester United got a purpose-built museum, etc. And Bristol Rovers have a wealth of material which is digitised in a digitised sort of format. So it was a very, very useful part. Yet again, a word that came up, and I know Fran mentioned it earlier, the networking already. And it was lovely to hear that, get in touch with Manchester United, what they can do, if they can help, etc. and I think I know Eric would probably bear me out, that as much as anything, it's this learning from each other, which has been mentioned so many times this morning. How do you, I think Eric said, and I don't know, I'm not very technical, how do you monitor what is done on Facebook? How do you monitor who visits your websites, etc.? It will perhaps facilitate, how to market stuff in the future, etc. So, it's a very beneficial 7 or 8 minutes. In fact, we pressed cancel when we were told to come back in the room because we were chatting away. But
I think hopefully that's one of the things that will start to come out of this bit of work, is so the people we can set up a sort of network about people who are interested in talking about audiences and developing audiences, and that there's that support there as well. Because I think that's, as you rightly said, Richard, I think that's one of the key things, is like sharing information and support with each other, and just saying, even through this, I've put organisation, and as it happened, it was football museums. I've put football museums in contact with each other because of work that the National Football Museum in England was doing. So again, it's just, I think that's really valuable, that people can then be linked up with each other and support each other, as well as, so it's that, as you said, that network and sort of peer-to-peer support as well. So
just on that note, I just wondered, do we get contact details, Fran?
I don't normally share people's details, so you would need to share those between yourselves separately. But I can contact both of you separately and just check that you're both happy for your details to be shared, and then I can.
I think for myself in the group, it was encouraging to talk to Eleanor about the time when Manchester United didn't have a museum. In 1986 they started pretty much the same as us. People who privately had a store of information and files and were doing things in a very individual way, and then it slowly morphed into this highly successful museum that so many people from all over the world go to visit in Manchester now. And I've enjoyed my visit there when I've gone, but it was encouraging to know that there was a time that they were at our stage, and that's always good, isn't it, when you can talk to some of these bigger clubs and more successquite museums around the country, and think that they did start with a bunch of amateurs with a load of archives like us.
Yeah, quite a lot of museums start that way, or archives or collections. So yeah. Is everybody okay? We're just running over slightly, so just want to check, is everybody okay just for another 5 minutes? Okay. Frank, could you just put up the next slide, and I'll just quickly run over a couple of things that I think, again, thanks, Helena. So can you just go to the next slide? Thanks, Frank. Yeah, so again, what is useful is a basic level of information, that demographic data, and going beyond age into gender, ethnicity, disability, economic status and postcode. And then why do people visit? How often do they visit? And why would they visit again? So a lot of that you can get through asking on a visitor survey, but they're also, when you look at your analytics as well through Google, you can get quite a lot of this information as well through there. So if you've got that basic level of information, that sets you up as a really good starting point in terms of building your audience research and also finding out more about your audiences. And then there's something we've touched on a lot, is the use of existing data. So there's also, apart from the data you have yourselves about things that you're already collecting, there's also other things out there as well. So I don't know if people have heard about area profile reports. Again, we can put the link up into the chat. You do have to pay for them, but they're really helpful in terms of finding out about your local profile, who's in your local area, and then they do it as well against it's called Mosaic Profiling, so it's looking at that cultural engagement of people who live in your area. So they are really, really helpful. I use them quite a lot when I'm doing audience development work, to set that sort of baseline about who's in your local area. So you set it up for a drive time, and then it gives you a profile of that area. So it may be that you've got for example, one we've done recently, there was a lot of families locally within a 30-mile drive time that the museum weren't really addressing. So we've put in place some pilot programs for that, and that was directly because of this area profile. But also, I mean, often your local authority will have basic profiling data as well. So if you search for it, they will often do something called like profile reports for the local area. So that will just give you your demographic data for your local area. So there are free resources out there as well. So that's one thing that's really helpful, and that'd be helpful for a lot of you, I think, maybe to have a look at that. And if anybody's got any questions about that, I'm quite happy for you to just email me offline about it if you want any more information there. And as I was saying, these externals, you know, it can be things like number of schools, things like sports participation. I mean, Sport England does a massive report about how people engage with sports. I've used that recently because of walking and the increase of walking and COVID. So I use that to provide evidence to produce some more walking activities with the museum I was working with. And then there are national surveys on how visitors do visit museums. So they're kind of their sort of their profile about how they visit as well. So there is a wealth of information out there as well that you can draw on to support what you're doing as well. So yeah, so there is quite a lot out there. So it's you know, again, if anybody's interested in anything specific, just you can always drop me a line. I'm quite happy to just give you some pointers. Fran, do you want to just go to the next slide? These are just a couple of signposting, again, about just gives you a bit of basics for audience development work. So these are two sort of how-to guides that I would recommend, that I still refer back to, even though I do audience development work all the time with people. I still refer back to it. So they give very good overviews on why it's important and what you do. And then actually I have very cleverly put the area profile link in there as well, which I'd forgotten about. So yeah, that's just just a couple of things. And then we'll pick up on the analytics stuff separately as well and send that through to people. Fran, do you want to just move to the next one? I think this is our poll. Oh, so yes, so what we just thought to wrap up, we're just really interested to hear about your thoughts on future training and support for understanding audiences. So we've just got a quick poll that Fran is going to put up for you to complete. So it's just quite useful for us to know.
Right,
some feedback.
Launch the poll now. There we are. Can everybody see that? You can tick as many as are relevant to you, and you have control over it at your end. So if you feel like you can't see any of the options at the bottom, if you scroll down on your screen, because how it displays on your screen will be different from how it displays on my screen here. So there are about 8 options, 7 or 8 options.
Do we get to see the results, Fran?
I can show you the results in a moment. Yeah, people are still voting. There's 2 people who.
No, I've not.
Well, it might be us.
Used voting on Zoom before.
Have you not? It's really good. I like it.
Yeah. I've done it where I've been sitting in an audience and done it through your phone when you get a link. But I
yes, we've used Slido before.
Yeah, I've used that before. So
right,
but only as a participant, not as a. Yeah. That's news.
Has everybody voted who would like to vote? Okay, so I will end the polling there. Thank you very much for everybody who took part.
Yeah. Was there anything else that people felt that they would want in terms of?
So that's the share. You can see what it's quite even across the board. So how to use the data collected and how to build online audiences and audience engagement. So that's particularly pertinent for the COVID period that we're in. But yeah, sorry, Sonia, I cut across you. So is there anything that anybody else would like support in that wasn't covered in that's particularly appropriate for your organisation? Thanks, Helena. Yeah, engagement strategies. Yeah.
Yes, I think that's one of the things, you know, how to write an audience development plan, because that was something in the survey that came back that there was very few people writing them. So again, lots of people were collecting the data, but then they were, again, it was for funders and things like that. So actually writing an audience development plan was quite low in terms of responses as well. So
when it's now, yeah, it comes into accreditation a lot more, but actually as a working document, it's a really useful piece of information to have, isn't it?
Okay. So yeah, just in terms of just a quick wrap up, yeah, thank you ever so much for that poll. That's really helpful as well. So as I say, I'm just in the process of just finishing up the report as well. So and then one of the things I'm writing into that report is in terms of support moving forward as well. So as I say, there's quite a lot that came out of today, and also there's been a lot that come out of the survey and that poll as well. So that sort of helps as well. So yeah, that hopefully we will be putting in some more training and support. I mean, it is dependent on funding, I think, by the sounds of things, but as all these, but things I think always are. So
I know that Justine, with her planning, recognises that audiences is a big area that cuts across everybody's work programmes. So I'm hoping that it will be one of our training strands going forward. So thank you, Sonia. That's been a really useful session. And thank you, everybody, for sharing your experiences and what's working for you and what's not working for you. I've just popped Sonia's email in the chat.
Oh, yeah.
I'll save the chat as well and distribute that with the follow-up resources. So you'll get a link to this recording and you'll get Sonia's PowerPoint. And there are various other things that we mentioned that I've made a note of. So I'll send you some other links, signposting links in the wrap up. And then there'll be the evaluation as always. So it'd be amazing if you could fill in the evaluation, because that helps us with our programming and our funding as well.
Yeah, definitely. It'd be definitely helpful as well, just to give a bit more idea about what we can provide moving forward as well. So yeah,
lovely. So thank you very much. Hope you enjoy the rest of your day. We shall end it there.
Just a quick question from Brian and the thing. Yes, Brian, I'm talking to Justine about potentially adding some things into that toolkit as well. So yeah, that's one of the things I've got on my list to try and link up with, because it's the thing, it's just trying to link everything together. It's a bit like this massive jigsaw puzzle that's going on at the moment, 3D jigsaw puzzle with all the different strategies and things that are going on and all the different bits. But yeah, that's one of the things that we'd noted that need to link into that as well. So
great. And the toolkit, for those of you who aren't aware, is a sort of a how-to guide. It's been mainly aimed at the national governing bodies of sport, but will be relevant to all sorts of organisations, and it's covering all different areas, and it should be launched in May time. And Katie Kavanagh's leading on that, and we will have sessions that support that as well. Okay, lovely. Thank you very much. Have a great rest of your day, and hope to see some of you soon.
Yeah, thank you so much for everybody's input. Thank you, everyone.